Best.Podcast.Ever is sponsored by the Gertzberg Law Firm, a full-service business law firm in Cleveland and Chagrin Falls that's changing the way businesses retain their attorneys. Go to gertzberglaw.com to learn more. While you're there, check out Cover My Six, a complete legal audit of the 6 areas that most often create or prevent business lawsuits and government investigations. Go to covermysix.com to learn how we keep you safe. Enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to listen to the best podcast ever recorded.
God forbid one of us ever find ourselves in a terrible situation through no fault of our own, through anger, through revenge, through pain, through addiction, through whatever it is. What type of lawyer would you want to represent you?
Hey folks, Alex Gertzberg here. Thanks for tuning in. This is a great episode. Ashley Jones is a criminal defense attorney here in Cleveland. She does a lot of different kinds of representation, DUI, drug, a lot of victimless crimes. Just a really great lawyer. I have a really good conversation with her about how she stays sane and what her processes are. She's kind of like me in that she is a bit of a personal development geek. So we talk a lot about routines and keeping emotional balance. She works much harder than I do, so I've got a lot to learn from her. So it's a great conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. You're going to see a number of things dropping over the next couple of days from me. If you're connected to us through our firm or from this podcast, we've just been incredibly busy in a lot of different areas. At the law firm, we have spun off a mergers and acquisitions advisory firm for the middle market, helping middle market companies find buyers and sellers for M&A transactions. That's pretty exciting. We've started doing some executive recruiting at the firm, which is really interesting. We've got a great staff for that, and the firm is just busy, and that's a good thing. So we're growing. We're looking for lawyers and for paralegal. So if you're in the Cleveland area, and you are an attorney, ideally a mid-level transactional lawyer who does business law, business transactions, or a legal secretary or paralegal, we want to talk to you. Send me your resume, ag@gertzberglaw.com. There will be 2 new episodes dropping in quick succession after this because I have been the bottleneck on recording these intros for this and those 2. And they're all really good episodes. The one after this one is with Paul Marnichek, good friend, great super fan of the podcast. Paul and I, as usual, have an awesome conversation about life and politics and growth, the world. And then Chaz Mascarino. You guys are going to want to catch that one. We talk a lot about assessments for your employees. And Chad's got a great journey. He is one of my entrepreneurial heroes. I think you'll enjoy learning from him. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up soon. We have, that's right. So we just started this week. I'm really excited about this. Can you tell? So go to gertzberglaw.com and you will find a link to our blog. You're going to want to subscribe to that. The current blog post that you'll see there is a new email newsletter that we just created and that we're pushing out. Currently it's every 2 weeks, but I think it's going to go to every week because we're getting great feedback on it, and there's no shortage of ideas for it at our firm. But basically, the idea is that we primarily represent entrepreneurs. We know them better than we know any other client demographic, any other kind of occupation, right? Entrepreneurs, founders, CEOs. That is our DNA, I think, I hope. So we created this email newsletter, and it's broken up into 3 hacks, 3 fixes, 3 tips that we give every single newsletter, every email. An entrepreneurial fix, a legal fix, and a random fix, right? And so check out the current one. They're short, they're sweet, they're all helpful, they're all actionable, they're all things that you can read quickly and then immediately put in place for your business and for your life. So check that out and subscribe to it, and then you'll be getting these really cool hacks every few weeks in your email box. So I'm excited about that. And there's a lot more that we're working on at the firm, and this podcast will be seeing some really cool changes in the future. But one thing that won't change is what it's about, which is good interviews, longer form interviews with entrepreneurs, with risk takers, with founders, with really interesting people who have really cool journeys that I, frankly, as I've never been shy about, am using this podcast to for purely self-serving reasons, right? I want to learn from the people that I interview, and I think that in the course of doing that, I will help our listeners learn what I learn. So enjoy this episode with Ashley Jones. I know you'll enjoy the next 2 and hopefully all the ones after that as well. And thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. Have an awesome day. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and start now. And I'm going to start firing inane questions at you. But I always keep my phone on vibrate because of the day that I got yelled at in court. And it was so terrifying. It was Judge Gall, and it was my first jury trial, and he yelled at me. He was so mean about it. Right? That it like traumatized me to the point where even when I'm not in court, my phone is always on vibrate.
It's so true. I think every lawyer thinks that way. Like, we're like, why would someone not keep their phone on silent? You're used to being in courthouses. Like,
that's exactly right. And I should amend that in case he's listening. Although I think he's gotten way worse treatment from podcasts than anything I could say to him. Did you listen to that? You listen to Serial, right?
Oh yeah. All 3 seasons.
Yeah. I will do nothing to Judge Gull here that hasn't been done way worse by Serial. But I should amend what I said just now, because it wasn't that he was mean to me. It was just that it was my first jury trial, and I was totally traumatized by.
That's a traumatizing experience. And look, if you were a judge, you'd probably, if the phone went off, I'd probably be pissed off too if I was a judge and somebody's phone went off. But I would give a warning, maybe. I mean, some judges they'll literally take it and donate it somewhere, which is great, but people make mistakes.
Well, and the other thing too is I don't know, it seemed like earlier, so this was almost 20 years ago, and it seemed like then it was way more of an awful thing to happen in court than it is today. I think now, right, you go there and you see the signs, turn your phones off, and some judges are way meaner about it than others. Right. But it seems like it's almost like, oh, you screwed up, I get it, turn it off now. Whereas I think a few years ago, it was considered it was the same as kicking a dog.
A major faux pas, contempt of court.
Yeah.
I think everyone has an experience like that, though, with a judge. I remember and I'm not going to say who it is. I was one of my very first times handling something in court, and I was the only woman there. That hasn't changed in nearly 10 years. Right. And the judge came on the bench, and everyone, stood up, whatever. And then every time all the cases in front of me got called, for some reason we weren't at the podium. I don't know. We were sitting. It was weird. And everyone stood up, and they were all mad. And the judge would say, sit down, and then finally people just kept sitting. They didn't stand. I get called, and I follow that protocol that everybody else is, and I got reamed. a new one for not standing, even though the people in front of me didn't. And this judge to this day, I don't like to go in there. And it's been almost 10 years. So I remember. I don't know if he remembers, but I remember.
And you were how new at that time?
Oh my gosh. Months.
Yes. See, that's the other thing, right? The judges that I know that go on power trips are definitely, their power trip is that much more prominent with newer people, you know? Because the longer you're there, it seems like they're more afraid of you just less likely to be kind of a bully, you know? Can you think about, when you think back, how long have you been doing this at this point, Ashley?
9 years in November.
9 years representing criminal defendants the entire time, right?
For the most part, less than 1% of my cases have been something else. Early on, I, took a divorce, took an eviction, but literally criminal work for the most part.
So if I say, Ashley, what is the case that you took on that gives you the best, warmest feeling in your heart, the one that you're most proud of, the one that, like, on your worst day, you think back on that case and you're like, that was the one that I went into practice for. What was that case?
You're really pulling the big questions out right away.
Right out the gate. Yeah.
So it's interesting. This case is nothing spectacular necessarily. It's not like a big murder case where someone was found not guilty. But I had a case very early on where a woman was trying to seal or expunge her record. And she had too many felonies. You can only have a certain number. And she had too many, but they had happened in a really, really close time. And she had gone to nursing school and accumulated all this debt. And she was getting ready to graduate from nursing school. And she said, I remember people telling me at the time that I could seal these from my record. And the judge was no longer on the bench. And of course, it wasn't on the record. And I don't know if it's because I've just naive or had a lot of time on my hands. I sometimes look longingly back at the amount of time that I put into certain questions that I don't have the time to do now. But I said, well, let's just file and we'll just, try to make some arguments that they happened close in time and all this stuff. And stroke of luck, the prosecutor felt compelled based on her mitigation, and the judge felt compelled to grant it. And so even though it really wasn't allowable under the law, anything can be granted as long as nobody appeals it. And so she got her record sealed. The funny thing is now the law has changed that she would be eligible, but this was probably eight years ago. She wasn't. And a couple years ago, I ended up going to she finished nursing school, and I ended up going to her nursing graduation. She invited me to her graduation, and I went and saw her graduate from nursing school.
That's awesome. Yeah, you changed her life. I mean, in a very real, practical way, you totally changed her life.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to have been a part of it. And it reminds me, that case reminds me to ask, and that you'll never get what you don't ask for. And a lot of lawyers told me no. And like I said, I was this brand new baby lawyer, and I said, well, let's just figure out a way to do it. And I knocked on the door and it answered.
I love stories like that because it reminds me that of the ripple effect. Because does she have kids?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So I think one of the reasons that we went into this profession is to affect change in people's lives, and that's the kind of change that has a ripple effect around her family, around her employer, her employees, her partners, and her life would have potentially gone in a very different direction, and that different direction would have had a similar ripple effect, and it may not have been positive.
Right.
That's awesome. Okay. So flipping it. Okay. when you think of that one case that haunts you to this day, because it was just the longest day, right? You're like when I think of the longest day, I think of like the way people describe D-Day, right? Like the D-Day invasion as the longest day, right? What is that case?
The longest day.
Yeah, the one that you still just are I lost one big trial, right? Huge. And I think about it every single day. A, because it was the only one I ever lost. B, because it was for a big dollar amount. And C, because I'm constantly replaying it in my mind, like things that I should have done differently or could have done differently if I had the chance again. Do you have a case like that?
Several. I've lost a lot of things, but I had a case early on. Sat second chair on a murder case. Actually, it was my case. I just wasn't qualified to handle it, and so I brought somebody else in, and it was kind of like an accomplice liability murder. The guy was not the shooter. A bad drug deal, as they tend to be. And he got convicted. We did everything we could, but it was a grueling trial and gruesome. And it was frustrating because he was not the principal and we lost. And he's still in prison and he was young. He was probably 22. And so that's a frustrating situation, even though different than yours. I don't think there's anything that I mean, I guess there's something you could always do differently, but I don't know that it would have made a difference. But just to talk about the ripple effect, right? We just talked about the ripple effect and how it can be good. This is how the ripple effect of someone's life can be bad, even before he got to me. But it's really hard to watch someone go to prison on a case like that. So he's in prison still and will be for a really long time over a really, really, stupid decision.
Yeah. Okay, so this next question, I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I know that our listeners and viewers must be thinking about this because I'm interviewing a criminal defense attorney, and you have to ask this question when you interview a criminal defense attorney or they take away your podcast license. So when you represent people accused and convicted of murder or drug dealing or violent crimes, right? Or even nonviolent crimes, but specific to this question, violent crimes, right? And you are fighting with everything you've got for their freedom. How do you reconcile the moral flip there between what they did and how you're helping them go free?
So how do I represent people that I think are guilty? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Eloquently? Yeah. I know the simple answer from a lot of lawyers is it doesn't bother me, but it's sometimes the simplest answer is the truest one. It really doesn't make a difference. I think if you're in this business for the right reason and you believe in law and you believe in justice, then it doesn't matter what someone did or didn't do. As far as I know, I've never been present at any of the crime scenes that my clients have alleged to have committed. And so I don't know what happened. I think the truth is usually in the middle. It's usually not what the police think and what the prosecutor thinks. It's usually not entirely what the client thinks, but it's somewhere in the middle. And that's not for me to decide. And that's the way our, system of justice is set up. And while it is broken in so many ways that I don't know that we have time to get into, but it's very broken, but there are some really foundational great things about it. And that's one of them. And without being super righteous, which I am super righteous, God forbid one of us ever find ourselves in a terrible situation through no fault of our own, through anger, through revenge, through pain, through addiction, through whatever it is. What type of lawyer would you want to represent you?
I think that last part was my favorite part of your answer, and I loved everything else you said, but that's exactly right. As a very practical matter, right? Whether you are guilty or innocent of the thing you're accused of, you go into a system where the other side has a very skilled prosecutor in most cases, whose job it is to get the maximum lever of the law applied to you to make, and when you are in that position, you want the best representation, and there are very good lawyers there who are available to step in, and you're one of them. So you fulfill a very real need in the way our justice system is set up, and I'm glad it's set up that way, and everyone else should be too. But there are cases, I think you told me this before, and I hope I can share it, and if I can't share it, then tell me, and then John will cut this part out. But there are cases that you won't take anymore. Do I have that right?
Yes, but not maybe for the reason that the viewers might be thinking, not on some moral high ground or, moral conflict. I just have found that there's certain cases, high-level felonies, rapes with a life tail on it, meaning it could have potential life sentence, that I just don't want to devote my career to. I enormously respect the people that do. And it's not to say that we don't work really hard at the office, because we're working hard on the cases that we have. But some of these high-level cases with life sentences are just not a game that I want to get involved in.
Okay, so peel that back a little bit more. Why? Why don't you want to get involved in those?
Well, my therapist would say that it's probably because I feel some sort of inadequacy, and I think that's probably a big part of it. I didn't know we were going to mention my therapist today, but I guess we're going to. So
we get real. We get real in these interviews, man.
Seriously, always. So yeah, I think there's some level of my feeling of like I'm not competent enough to handle those. But also just I don't want to work every weekend prepping for a trial. And that's a little bit different now in Corona world, where who knows when we'll have jury trials again. But under normal circumstances, like I don't want to be prepping for a trial every weekend. I just I don't want to do that. And those cases require that type of work 7 days a week. And when you're handling high level cases like that have to get tried because there's just no other option, you're preparing every weekend for a trial that may or may not start on Monday. And that's just not what I want to do.
I have a part of every one of my sessions with my therapist tagged specifically to imposter syndrome. So you're not, I'm right there with you. Yeah, no, I thought you were going to have you're right. I thought what you were going to say was that, what I would have, what my answer would be, which is that, those are different kinds of stakes.
Mm-hmm.
Those are,
yeah.
I remember, I may have told you this, when we were talking in person like 2 months ago. I was a clerk for a law clerk for a very prominent criminal defense attorney here in Cleveland, and we represented a high school coach who was accused of raping a student he was a track team coach, and to this day I'm convinced he didn't do it. He was convicted. He went to prison for a really long time. I'm haunted by my one loss that was purely financial in nature. I think that I don't know how I would be able to handle that kind of those kinds of stakes, but that's just me. And it's, I'm glad that that's not that wouldn't be your only answer, because I think that your first answer to that first question, I mean, you are a criminal defense attorney. You are kind of wired for taking on those bets to some extent already. I don't know. I guess us business lawyers are too, to some extent. It's different stakes. how do you, well, we need to tackle this issue. There is a tremendous amount of pushback and obstacles that your clients face before they even get into court, right? Just getting arrested in the first place, getting pulled over, the way evidence is collected, the way evidence is withheld. What I know about the criminal justice system is that your clients are, it's an uphill, they're walking an uphill battle. They're fighting an uphill battle from day one. That's a fact, right? It's undeniable. How do you deal with that from an emotional standpoint, right? Like, I know how you deal with it as a lawyer. You fight, right? You understand the rules and you work within the parameters that, you know, the rules of criminal procedure and the rules of professional conduct give you. But on an emotional level, when you see your clients being railroaded, from pretty much their first contact with the police officer until their sentencing or acquittal, right? How do you deal with the emotional aspect of that uphill battle that they're fighting on a regular basis?
It's hard to not feel it personally, even though it's not something that's happening to me. And that's sometimes a disconnect with clients as well, because, clients are even at times distrustful of their advocate, right? They think that we're still part of the system and we're lawyers and we're rich and we're, we don't get it. And this is for people that, that retain criminal lawyers, that have the ability to retain criminal lawyers, just because their backs are up against the wall. And so you're not always thinking clearly. And so I just try to take myself out of it, that it's not about me. Just I'm here to do a job. And I think a lot of people think, well, if you take that approach, then how can you care, right? But that's the only way to get the work done, is to not be so emotionally invested in it that you completely lose perspective. Right. I just had a conversation today with a client who's charged with drug trafficking. And he's like, well, and he has a history of drug trafficking. And he's like, well, there's no video. And I'm like, well, no, there's no video, but the officer is going to testify that he saw you making this hand-to-hand transaction. And then the car that was stopped, the person was driving and doing drugs. They had a crack pipe. And this car had just done a hand-to-hand transaction with you. Did he maybe give him money, jelly beans, Mike and Ike's? I don't know, maybe, but a police officer is going to testify otherwise, and it's going to be very hard for a jury or a judge to believe that he wasn't trafficking in drugs. And so his perspective was, well, there's no video. And I told him, well, there's usually not video. There's usually not evidence that we think of that we see on TV. There's usually just people's testimony. And as a society, and this is changing, but as a society, we tend to believe police officers. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think it probably just opened up a bunch of things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you answered the question in the sense that regardless of how fair or unfair the system is to your clients, your job is still the same, and your emotional attachment or detachment is going to, you didn't say this, but I think that you and I probably both believe that the best help that we can give our clients as an advocate is to be as emotionally unattached as possible.
Right. And a lot of lawyers really disagree with that. I tell clients straight up when I meet with them, I let them talk, right? And I let them say what they want to say without me, asking legal things and bringing up weird legal terms. But then I say, listen, I can sit here or talk to you every other day about how unfair this is, and we could do it till we're blue in the face, but it will not give us a solution. And while I care about you and I care about your family, I would rather get you out of this situation as intact as possible than just be your therapist, because right. That's not going to get you through criminal charges.
Yeah. Okay. So, this is a podcast for entrepreneurs and and business owners. I'm a business owner. You're a business owner. My clients tend to all be business owners, and so a lot of this is for their benefit too. But let me fire some questions at you about being a business owner. The first is, why would you want to be a business owner? Why did you do it? Why did you start your own shop?
I don't have a really good answer for this. That's why you have to ask it. I did not understand 9 years ago why, if I had a law license, I wouldn't just use it. I just couldn't wrap my brain around it. Nobody wanted to give me a job. And I just started hustling for cases, mostly to survive. I had nothing, but I just couldn't wrap my brain around why I wouldn't use the law license. And so while I didn't even really think about it as a business, I just thought about it as practicing law, and then it became a business kind of later.
Do you think about it as a business now?
Yes.
So when you think about your practice as a business, well, talk about some of the bigger challenges in being both a practitioner and basically an employee in your business, but also as a business owner. What are the bigger challenges that you've faced as a business owner over the last 9 years?
Trying not to grow too fast, trying to really understand what I need to spend money on and what I don't. I'm still struggling with that. I think everyone is, if they're being honest. I've tried out, I've done advertising that I didn't need to do and dumped too much money into stupid stuff. So I think just trying to understand that you don't have to keep up with the Joneses, even if your last name is Jones. And so that's number one. And I think also just keeping the hustle. I love the hustle, but the hustle is also like a hamster wheel. And sometimes you really want to get off the hamster wheel. Like this morning, the phone was ringing. I just don't even want to talk to new people. Like, I have projects I need to get done on old people, but you have to keep the hamster wheel kind of going, and you have to find a way to not burn out with that and recognize the burnout of that, which is so funny because, speaking of podcasts, I just listened to a podcast this morning with Brendan Burchard, my buddy, about recognizing burnout before you're deciding that eating like a pint of ice cream is a good idea. Recognize it first. So I think that's what I'm trying to learn is learn what my limits are in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, here, so I didn't listen to that podcast, but but I probably will at some point. But if I never do, how do you recognize burnout?
Well, I'm not all the way through the podcast. So I had to get out of the car, which is like my prime podcast listening time. But so I have to, I guess, give you an update on that. But I think he just, being in tune with your body and your mind. I mean, and so maybe I would have recognized yesterday something. And I think I have to go back and think about this, because today I was just kind of like, I don't really feel like working. I don't want to be on the hamster wheel anymore. And so there probably was something that I did yesterday or something that I thought yesterday that would give me a cue as to how I was going to feel today. But we had to pay attention to our mind and our body.
I have an answer to that question. Here's my, and I believe very strongly in this. I think that every business owner has to be ruthless with how they spend their time. And I learned this probably way too late, but I learned it eventually a few years ago. And I don't know if I shared this with you at any point, Ashley. Well, I would say so. Stop me if I have, but for the benefit of of the listeners anyway, and you, the exercise that I learned to do a few years ago was to periodically make a list of everything you do professionally, and then create. Over a 2-week period, you might have like 50 things that you do that are different and independent of each other, right? And then you make 3 columns. The first is on a scale of 1 to 4, how much joy does this task bring you? The second is on a scale of 1 to 4, how good at it are you relative to anybody else you know around you that can do it either for you or with you? And the third is how much money does this task make for you? A 4 in for any of those means a lot, right? It brings me a lot of joy. I'm great at it, and it makes me a ton of money. And then you just scale down. A 1 in any of those would mean I hate this. I can't stand doing this task, or I suck at it, or it makes me zero money. I'm just giving my time away. And the goal is to do that exercise periodically so that you are either eliminating or delegating everything that isn't all 4s or 3s, right? And if you do this every quarter, and people, other business owners that I know that know that have either done this or know about it, all say the same thing. They say in the beginning, you don't do that because you think it's all going to cost more money, right? Like, I can't delegate stuff away because then I got to pay somebody to do this stuff that I can do. Or they'll say, I don't trust anyone else to do what I can do. But what I've learned from that is you can't afford not to do it. Particularly if you're not making any money on it. That means that you're giving your time away, and that's time that could be spent on income producing things. And you have to be good with people making mistakes, right? People are not going to do it as well as you think you can do it, but you can empower them and you can train them, and you can keep upgrading, right? You can keep adding people to your team who do it better and better. But when I started doing that exercise, my burnout level went way down, my income went way up, and my just general joy, right, of what I do increased substantially. So anyway, that's my really long-winded
that's
answer.
really good. And that's kind of what the part I did listen to today was, as entrepreneurs and as high performing type A people, we say yes to everything. Right. And he said that when you're saying yes to everything, you're acting on the defense because you don't know what you want to do. Right. When you know what you want to do, you have no problem saying no to something. So when someone says, well, do you want to come speak at this? You're like, no. If you're like unsure and you don't know like what brings you joy, or you don't know what makes you money, or you don't know what you like, then you're like, well, sure, I'll try it out. Sure. But right. That really resonates with me because you know that I have my hat in like 8 million things, which is part of my personality too. But I definitely need to embrace more of the done, not perfect mentality.
Yeah, you definitely have a lot of energy. Nobody will ever accuse you of being too laid back. I think you should be more laid back, but you've got an energy about you and a momentum that is, you are a force, Ashley. Think back on the last 9 years of being a business owner and talk about like an aha moment, or a time that you just kind of saw things more clearly, maybe as a business owner, or made a change in your business or in your lifestyle as a business owner that kind of just made things much easier. Sometimes I think I should share questions that I'm going to ask.
I mean, my brain is like, yes, but really, I know you shouldn't. Yeah. So, you and I met each other like years ago, right? You remember this? We had lunch one time. Do you remember this? Like,
I do. I don't know, we ate at Paladar.
We ate at Paladar. Yeah. And that was probably, I don't even know, 5 or 6 years ago. It was quite a while ago. Anyways, so, back then I was kind of like ultimate burnout, in a different way than I am now, but I was really unhealthy. And so over the course of a couple of years, I kind of took, control of my physical health and my mental health. And I lost a lot of weight and started exercising and like taking care of my body. and getting into personal development and all these things that we talk about. And so I think that recognizing that I had the time to do those things, and kind of what you said, like you can't afford not to do those things, is the way I think about it now. I can't afford not to spend 20-30 minutes a day exercising, which when you think about it is like such a small snippet of the day, but we say we don't have time or to pack my lunch or whatever it is. So just taking that care to actually think about taking care of myself and allowing myself time has somehow made me more productive and given me more time. So that was a pretty big aha moment, because I was definitely one of the I don't have time to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell our clients and entrepreneurs and startup founders, one of my favorite things to do as a business owner is to just look ahead and take random days off, like a Wednesday, right? Clear your calendar, cancel your meetings, because that's what you work for. That's why you went into this in the first place, right? Is to have more freedom of time and money and relationships, purpose, whatever. But we're all so hard charging. You're right. We're all so type A that we don't give ourselves permission to do that. But when you do it, but you're not allowed to do any work that day. That's the rule, right? It is so liberating. It just feels amazing to just, oh yeah, this is why I became a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is the biggest kick in the ass that you are dealing with as a business owner? What is the biggest challenge? And maybe something that you've already had and solved, or maybe it's something that's happening now, but what is the biggest, just the thing that you're gritting your teeth over in running your own shop?
Probably delegation, like we talked about. There are a lot of things that I do that I shouldn't be doing, and I keep talking about how I shouldn't be doing it, but I still don't do it. So yeah, I think just not letting go of things and not having better systems to let go of those things, which is on me to create them. But again, it goes back, to making excuses about time and what's important. So systems and delegation.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a good one. That's a big one, I think.
Everybody, I think. I mean, if you're really being honest, I am part of this. So when COVID happened, I mean, it's still happening, but like when it really happened in March, I know I had like a week, I think we talked in March, where I was like, can you say shit on podcasts? Shit. What are we going to do? Like, no one's getting arrested. This is not good for business. Like, baby needs new shoes, right? I'm the baby. But, and so we ended up, pivoting a little bit, still in the criminal world, but pivoting to start doing a lot of early release work. But, we figured it out. A lot of businesses have had to pivot. But, I'm part of this. I created this roundtable group of criminal lawyers across the country. And for a while we were meeting weekly, and there were some people in there that like, they have their shit together. I mean, they have systems and they have everything like down to a science with workflows and intake and training on their staff. And so that's been helpful and encouraging to me to see and these are all criminal lawyers. So I have no excuse because they do the exact same thing that I do. So I can't even say like, oh, well, your business is different than I couldn't do that as a criminal lawyer. Like these people are doing it. So just kind of like surrounding myself with people like that and continuing to learn from them, but then also implement it. Yeah. Like not just soak the knowledge in, actually take the next step and implement it is kind of my development right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that answer. It reminds me too that you really have to surround yourself with other practitioners and other business people, other business owners. I never understand. So you're in this legal innovator committee that we've got at the Bar Association, and I know, and I think are you still the chair of the small firm solo committee?
No, I was for several years, but I'm the co-chair of the criminal law section right now.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you've got that figured out, dude. You are very intentional about surrounding yourself with people who you can learn from and who you can teach.
Right.
No, I think that that's huge. I never understand people who just are just practitioners, right? They just practice. They show up, they do their thing, they go home, but they don't expand their networks and their spectrum, I guess, their vision. I feel like they're just cheating themselves when they do that, you know.
Right.
And
I mean, if only for like business purposes, if only for being a greedy bastard and wanting the referrals, do it. But like, these are your people, right? Like these are, lawyers, are your people. And why would you not, I don't know, I don't know if it's people that just like burn out from the law and like, they don't want anything to do with the law in their personal life, which I can understand. Like, you have to separate a little bit, but it doesn't make any sense from a business standpoint either.
yeah.
So.
Okay. So I asked you a bunch of questions about your practice as a lawyer. I asked you a bunch of questions about your role as a business owner. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of totally random and inane questions that don't belong anywhere. And I call this the lightning round,
This is fun.
which suggests that it's fast, but it's not. It's just a bunch of inane questions. Okay, you ready? What's an assumption that you had for a long time that you later found to be totally bullshit?
Dang. And this one you should send earlier. An assumption. Are you allowed to pass on the questions and come back?
You are, but we're definitely coming back.
Okay, you hold me to it, but I gotta think about it.
All right. And you can only pass once.
I'm just making the rules up as I go.
I know you are. You are. You know what? Can I tell you something? I think that your buddy and mine, Ian Friedman, was the only other person I interviewed on this podcast that made up their own rules during my lightning round.
Ian's my buddy, and I did that podcast. It was really good.
You guys, did I call him out on that? Did I say you're the only one that has like challenged my lightning round rules?
I remember that part, but
I thought I did.
Maybe it got edited out. No, I'm joking.
I hope, and maybe I've got that totally wrong. Maybe
I just forgot is probably more likely what happened.
Somebody did it recently. I want to say it was him.
That sounds like an Ian thing, which is a total compliment because he's my my buddy. But
yeah. Okay. Conversely, what's a misconception people have had or still have about you?
I don't know. I get this. I don't know if it's like the RBF thing or I don't know what it is, but like people think I'm like really unapproachable. I get that a lot, that I'm not approachable or I'm like intimidating, which I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I'm very intimidating, but I get that people are intimidated by me or that I'm not approachable, which kind of hurts my feelings a little bit.
You're a very strong-willed person, and I would actually take that as a compliment.
Thanks.
I think that people who are easily intimidated would find someone who is assertive and confident, which whether you are or not on the inside, you project yourself to be on the outside, intimidating, right? But that's interesting. Okay. What is like the top one or two things that you're just most curious about?
In general?
Yeah, in life.
Like topics or places?
Yeah, like what's the one thing that like if you like only had like a minute on the internet or on Facebook or something and you started reading about it, it would turn into like 2 hours?
This is gonna sound so weird. I'm like really fascinated by cults.
Ooh, interesting.
I'm like really into like, I wouldn't say really, but like I'm really fascinated by cults and just by how that happens and how they're formed and I guess the criminal part of it as well. But
you did tell me when I saw you last that you had just finished Waco on Netflix.
Oh God. Did you watch it?
I did. I had a different opinion about it than you did. Like I really like the story. Like, well, it's heartbreaking, right? And what happened to the kids is heartbreaking.
I bawled my eyes out.
Yeah, but I didn't like the way they made that movie or that 7-part miniseries personally.
What did you think that they made Koresh too charismatic?
No, I thought that it could have been better written. Like I just thought the screenplay. Look, you had very compelling facts. It is a heart-wrenching story from both sides, from the FBI side and from the religious group side, right? And you had this great like political and media dynamic happening around it, right? I don't know. I just thought like if you would have given that to like Aaron Sorkin or to like Spielberg or something like that, they could have done. I don't know. I don't want to poo-poo your answer to that question. Anyway, you didn't even answer that. I gave that. You just said cults, and I said Waco.
That was my answer.
No, I know. I'm saying your answer is.
And then I read the book, which was kind of weird, but like the book from like the one survivor, Thibodeau. It was kind of a weird book, but. Yeah.
No, I too am fascinated by cults though. Like, how far does your fascination with cults go? Like, what made you so obsessed with them?
I don't know. It doesn't go like far enough that I'm willing to like pretend to be in one or something, if that's what you think, but I think I'm just, I don't know. Like, I think I'm naturally pretty curious. So like anything that I see that I didn't know, I'll like my natural inclination as like a total nerd is like, oh, I should go to the library and get a book about that, which thank God the library opened back up. So like we were in Rocky River at Lakewood Park a couple weeks ago. And there's this little, and we lived in Lakewood for years. I don't know how I didn't know this, but there was this little plaque and it talks about how that part of the river was like part of the Underground Railroad. And I'm like, what? I didn't even know this. So I'm like, I need to put that on my library list. Like, and my husband's like laughing at me, like, in an endearing way. But so I think something like that happens. And I'm like, I just want to dig a little bit deeper. So it could be anything. The same thing happened with Waco. I saw people talking about it on Facebook. I'm like, let's watch it. Okay, let's read the book now.
Yeah. Have you read anything about Jim Jones?
No, but I need to.
Yeah, that's some crazy shit right there.
Like that's like that's insane.
Yeah, I'm I'm fascinated with a particular aspect of about cults, and that is the ability for the characteristics that one has to have to be completely mesmerized by some charismatic leader, and how those same characteristics are applicable in non-cult situations like political ones or religious ones, or like it may not rise to the level of cults, but I think that some social groups and some political groups, you sit back and you're like, how do people believe what these people believe? You know what I mean? It is, I don't know. I actually would totally get political with you, but we don't have enough time, and that is a wormhole that you and I will go down, and we'll never get you out in time. So when you come back for your second time on this podcast, we'll talk politics.
Okay.
Can you think of the book or author, but it can't be religious, all right? The non-religious book or author whose words you apply the most in your life on a day-to-day basis?
No. Can I say no? I can't think of anything.
You can't think of a book that you read that it was just so, because you're like you read self-help shit like I do. No. You can't think of some book that was so influential in your life that you still do the things that you started doing after you read that book?
No, you're
Okay.
really calling me out on this. I mean, yeah, I read books. I'm reading all the time, fiction and nonfiction. So as soon as we get off this call, I'm like, oh, I should have said that. I mean, I guess maybe if I think about it, this is what my therapist says too. She goes, quit giving me the gut answer.
Yeah.
She let it sit for a minute. I have a hard time just let it sit. So I let it sit. And then I'm like, oh. So the thing that comes to mind is the book The Slight Edge. Did you ever read The Slight Edge?
No, but I'm gonna now.
Really good. It's like one of those books you could reread, every couple of years just to kind of remember it. But it essentially talks about how the slight edge, the tiny little things that we do every day are the things that have the biggest effect. So it's not the huge sweeping changes. It's the tiny little things. What time do you get up? What do you do when you get up? What time do you work out? Whatever. So just it's kind of like the thought of like how life is in the margins, which I really look at me thinking of all these answers. Life is in the margins. It's in the inches. Things happen by luck and by happenstance, and things go 2 inches this way and it's completely different. So the slight edge kind of is that like master your habits and master your life type of deal.
Yeah, that's like the butterfly effect. Like a little thing you do will have that ripple effect. That also reminds me of Atomic Habits. Have you ever read that book?
No, but I've heard really good things about
it's
it.
so good. So good. Yeah, if you liked The Slight Edge, you would really like Atomic Habits. If you were a professional MMA fighter, okay? You know MMA, right? Mixed martial arts. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't want to assume anything. You are a professional MMA fighter. What song is playing as you're entering the ring?
Oh my God. Probably Applause by Lady Gaga.
Interesting. I've never heard that song before. I will not ask you to sing it. But I am going to check it out.
Maybe in part 3 of the podcast if we can go to a
bar. Do you think you would sing it if I said, would you sing this song?
Today? No. With that. We'll turn this into a karaoke podcast and like lickety split.
Ooh, I like where you're going with this, Ashley. That's a great idea. What is a habit or this goes kind of with the slight edge, actually. What is a habit or routine that you currently do on a regular basis that give? I totally know what you're going to say, but say it anyway. Or at least I think I do. I shouldn't make assumptions. What is a habit or routine that you do on a regular basis that from which you get the most mileage?
Writing down at the end of the day 10 things I'm grateful for.
Oh, wow. That's not at all what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say exercising.
Yep.
But that's a great one.
Yeah, I started doing this maybe about a year ago at this point, and I have missed very few days. And so sometimes I do it at the night. Sometimes I do it when I wake up and I'll think about the past 24 hours, and it's always 10 things. And there are days when it's hard and that's sad. It seems hard at first that you can't think of 10 things. And it forces you to think about the little things too, not just like the big, huge things that happen. Like, oh yeah, I got this case dismissed and this happened. But then you think about like, oh, I walked outside and it smelled like rain. Yeah. Or oh, my lilies are blooming or whatever. So the gratitude practice is huge.
I do that in the morning and I try to remember to do it in the afternoon. And the rule I make for myself is it can't be a repeat. Cause I had a tendency of always saying, my fiance or my daughter or something like that. And, so now my rule is it can't repeat. But that's a great one. Gratitude practice is so huge. It totally changes. I'm convinced that it rewires your brain, like physically,
I agree.
What is the metric that you use at the end of the day? Well, since we're already talking about the end of the day, to determine whether you've had a good day.
The metric that I use.
How do you know if you had a good day that day?
I don't know if I know the answer to this. Like, I feel like I maybe need to like figure that out if I'm being honest.
That's fair. Well, I don't know if you'll know the answer to this next one either then, because it goes with this one. And that is, what is the metric that you think you'll use at the end of your life to determine whether you've had a life well lived?
Does it have to just be one thing?
No, not at all. Say whatever you want.
I think the metric would be, did I help people when they needed help? And did I let myself be loved? And did I love?
Oh, I love that answer. You're going to make me cry. Can you think of a time that you, I don't know if I want to ask you that one actually. Here's a fun one, but I don't know if you'll answer it. What question would you hate for me to ask you if you absolutely had to tell the truth?
I don't know. I mean, I'm an open book, I think. I don't know. You can ask me whatever you want to ask.
Okay, ready? I'm going to. Okay, so this is usually the last lightning round question, but I'm going to test what you just said. Right? So I kind of set you up for it, but I've only recently, I think that actually was the first time I've ever asked that last question. This would be my last one, but we got to go back to the one you passed on.
Right.
What is an embarrassing thing about yourself that only a few people know? And for extra credit, for bonus points, that no one else knows.
What do you get to use the points for?
You get to get a free cheeseburger at McDonald's. I don't know.
Something that people don't know. I talk in my sleep.
Ooh, is that right?
Yeah. Talking about being like interested in things, I'm like I just was talking to my husband about this because a couple of nights ago I don't even know, and sometimes I'll get up, like he knows if I am like getting up, like it's not like I got up slowly and like he thought I was going to the bathroom or something. Like I will like jump up. And I'm curious, like what the physiological, like, does it happen when I'm really tired? Does it happen with alcohol? Like and I haven't really tested it out to see like what exactly it is. But along that lines, because I'm such a team player, I will tell you something that I don't even think my husband knows this.
Ooh, extra credit. It's happening right now.
Credit for that cheeseburger off the dollar menu. When I don't even know how old I was, like 10, maybe 11. I spent a lot of summers in my grandparents' house. And they're both still living, which is awesome. Like I have such incredible memories of just spending a summer with them. And I slept walk outside and they woke up and I was pounding on the door trying to get in.
Wow.
And going like sad. They were terrified, but I was so afraid to go to sleep. And so my grandma would like at night, she would put like the potato bin in front of my bedroom door and like a bunch of things that like they would wake up because I was so afraid to go to sleep. And it's embarrassing too. Like even like a couple of days ago, like I told my husband, I was like, I'm like really embarrassed about it because he like has to kind of deal with it. It's not like every night, but there's something in my brain or my body, I don't know, that makes me, some nights I will just be having like full conversations, but he doesn't know what I'm talking about.
God, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Because is it like articulate? Like, can he understand what you're saying?
He understands like the words that I'm saying, but they don't like make sense together. And so like when we first started dating, like he didn't realize like what was happening, right? So he's like trying to talk to me, but like, and then I don't know why I'm telling you all these things. Then like I'll get mad. So like it's like I know that I'm asleep. And so I think it's like part of me like just always having a chip on my shoulder and like fearing embarrassment and stuff. But like I will like I know that I'm asleep, but then he was like trying to talk to me. So I was like getting like defensive and like mad because I was like I knew I was asleep, but I couldn't like get out of it. It's the worst feeling, truly.
it's like you're lucid dreaming and you're fighting with your husband while you're lucid dreaming.
Pretty much.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. I bet you didn't even think I was going to share anything, and I
really didn't. You were true to what you said, that there isn't a question that you would hate for me to ask because you would just tell me the answer. Okay. The question you passed on was, what's an assumption you had for a long time that you later found to be totally bullshit?
Still don't have the right answer. I think that people can't change.
You do right now? You think that right now, or you used to think that?
No, I used to think that. Okay. Yeah, people can't change. And that, your childhood or things that you were exposed to or your beliefs were set. And specifically when I went to law school, I became a lot more progressive, I guess is the word we're using these days. Liberal. I'm a liberal. It's a thing to be a liberal. Yeah. So I had these beliefs. I grew up in a small town and, had certain beliefs about things. And so I've seen that through myself, but then through like other people that I know, that you can change your world beliefs and like your beliefs about people and social issues and things like that.
Yeah. That's so interesting because intuitively I know that people can change. Like from a scientific standpoint, everyone can change almost anything about the way they think. Well, everything about the way they think and many, many things about their bodies, right? And their physical performance. But I don't know, lately, and more so as time goes on and as I get older, I think that it becomes harder and harder to change people's mindset or for people to change their own minds based on how bombarded they are by media, TV, people, messaging that is calibrated to not make them change, to make them think a particular way. And it's like, there's so many choices out there now, which is a good thing, but to connect with a belief system that you've got, right? You can connect a belief that you have, regardless of what that belief is, with someone else who has that belief through so many different ways today, right? And there are, on the other side of that, right, connection, companies and media who are so good at, just like enraging you or making you fixate or whatever, that like as time goes on, I just think that it's hard, like people just dig in more, it's harder to get people to actually listen and change their own minds. That, and it's particularly because, boy, I'm really getting on a soapbox here, but I'm going to finish this thought. Particularly because today, more than we ever have before, we are disagreeing on facts, on science, on data, right? And once you start disagreeing on what's real, I mean, it's like, what else is there? At that point, like, I mean, honestly, I feel like lately I've felt like we live in the Matrix.
Agreed. I agree with everything that you say. And I think sometimes I'm being naive and the eternal optimist, but
I agree. I agree with what you said. I think people can change. I just think it's hard. It's becoming harder for them to want to change or to actually change.
Right. Well, that is definitely true for a variety of reasons that we'll have to get into in part 2 about people's feelings being, validated and people being emboldened to, feel or think certain things, which is what we've seen. People have been emboldened. America's underbelly has been exposed and people have been able to latch on.
Yeah. Yeah. God, that's a really good analogy. It also dovetails into our cult discussion nicely.
Yes, I knew that's where you're going. So, right, yeah, it's really at the core of it, it's really interesting. And I think the scary thing is that I don't think that there's anything. I think anybody could end up in a cult. I know people would say oh, I wouldn't, but I think I don't know. I think anybody could.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. Ashley, you're amazing. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. Yeah. It's ashleyjoneslaw.com, folks. Ashley, you are an amazing criminal defense attorney, and you are, and I'm very grateful for the time that you gave me. And so thank you. Is there anything before we click off, anything we want to get out into the universe, anything you're working on, anything that is interesting that we didn't talk about, anything at all?
The only thing I would say, because you're giving me the opportunity and I don't like to turn down opportunities, I have been kicking around this idea for a while now of doing consulting with lawyers starting practices, something that you and I are both interested in, and specifically teaching people how to, even if they're not going to run their own practice, but teach them how to manage their brand and build a book of business and manage their social media. And so I've built a course, and I just need to bite the bullet and say done, not perfect, quite frankly, to actually have that operational.
I love this idea, and you are good at it, and you have a lot to say on that topic. And yeah, I think that somewhere out there right now is your first client, and they need to call you so that you can coach them into a more successful and fulfilling career and life. Ashley, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I will talk to you again soon, hopefully tomorrow at the Legal Innovator Committee meeting. But I'm sure I'll see you around town, and I'll see you again soon. We'll talk soon, okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we thank you for listening. And remember to check out the Gertzberg Law Firm. Whether you are starting, running, growing, or transitioning a business, or if you need to create or update your wills, trust, or estate plan, our team will give you an incredible level of personalized attention and a passionate commitment to meet your objectives. We are veteran-owned, and our award-winning lawyers have the highest ranking from Super Lawyers and Avo. We have also recently received the coveted Weatherhead 100 Upstarts Award for a second year in a row, and we are among the first Ohio business law firms to offer our clients a non-billable alternative on every single matter we handle for them, and opt out of the billable hour. What we are most proud of, though, are the many things our clients rely on us for. We successfully defend them in court, but we also help them avoid the courtroom with our Cover My Six service. We protect their assets through good estate and succession planning, and we assist our clients in many non-legal business services like recruiting and business development. We want our clients to feel confident in their choices and to help them resolve any issues or potential problems quickly and efficiently so they can get back to what they love, running their businesses. More than just litigators, we are trusted advisors, problem solvers, and growers of businesses. Let us help you and your company. Call us or find us online to learn more. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.